We live in an age of static. Algorithms curate our reality. Loneliness has become a public health crisis. And for many of us, the search for meaning feels slippery, like trying to build a house on sand. Most people try to solve this with self-help books or meditation apps. But my guest today, he took a different approach. He didn't just write a book, he engineered a universe. I'm talking about large series of books, both fiction and nonfiction. A new literary genre called speculative procedural ontopunk, a massive sci-fi saga spanning centuries, and a real-world foundation designed to fight suicide and despair. Welcome to the cartography of becoming. I'm Alex, and today I'm sitting down with the architect of this massive ecosystem, Djeff Bee. Djeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, I have to start with the obvious. You are a scientist and an engineer by trade. You work with digital twins, computer vision, virtual reality, complex systems. Usually, when people have a midlife existential crisis, they buy a sports car or they go to an ashram. You decided to redesign the concept of the meaning of life using physics and science fiction. Why? Why go to such extreme lengths?
Yeah, I suppose buying a car would have been cheaper and faster. Look, I think it comes down to how my brain works. I'm an engineer. When an engineer sees a system failing, whether it's a bridge, a software code, or a human life, we don't just want to patch it. We want to understand the root cause. I looked around, and I looked inside myself, and I saw a system failure. I saw despair. I saw people, good people, completely disillusioned by the modern world. And the traditional answers, just be happy or follow your passion, they felt flimsy. They felt like subjective noise. I wanted something objective. I wanted to find let's call it the physics of fulfillment.
The physics of fulfillment. That is a bold phrase. So, before we dive into the sci-fi universe you built, take us back to the start. You've mentioned that this project actually began decades ago with a specific moment of despair. You call it version 1.0. What happened there?
I was 15. And frankly, I was staring into the abyss. It wasn't just teenage angst. It was a profound, crushing sense of meaninglessness. I looked at the adult world, the survival mode of wake up, work, consume, sleep, and it looked like a trap. I remember waking up in the hospital after trying to commit suicide, at a threshold between despair and hope, quite literally. And in that moment, I made a vow, a contract with myself. I decided that if I could find a way through the dark, if I could engineer a path that actually worked, I wouldn't just keep it to myself. I would map it. I would build a lighthouse for anyone else stuck in that same storm. So everything you see now, the books, the Caldwell Legacy, the Foundation Project, something I hope I will find ways to finance and launch in the future, it's all just the execution of that vow I made at 15. It is the search result of a 30-year query.
That explains the motivation. You spent decades searching for that map, and that search eventually turned into the nonfiction quartet, starting with your book, Meaningfulness. But in that work, you draw a very hard line in the sand. You make a distinction between happiness and meaningfulness. In fact, you argue that chasing happiness is actually a trap. Can you unpack that for us?
It is indeed a trap, and it's a dangerous one. We live in a culture obsessed with happiness. But happiness is an emotion. It's a chemical spike. It is, by definition, transient. If you make happiness your primary goal, you are setting yourself up for failure, because no human being can be happy all the time. When the happiness fades, which it must, you feel like you've failed. You feel empty. Meaningfulness is different. Meaningfulness is a state of being. It's structural. You can lead a meaningful life even when you are suffering or grieving or struggling. In fact, sometimes that's when life is most meaningful.
So if happiness is just a chemical spike, what is the structure of meaningfulness? You claim in the books that you found an objective answer. That's a bold claim, Jeff. Philosophers have been arguing about this for thousands of years, saying meaning is subjective. You're saying it's objective?
Exactly, I am. And I found that the answer is connection. Now wait, I know how that sounds. It sounds like a greeting card. Connect with people, love one another. But I am not talking about connection as a warm, fuzzy feeling. I am talking about connection as a fundamental law of physics.
Okay, walk me through the physics of it.
Think about it. What holds the universe together? Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force? These are all just fancy words for connection. Without connection, atoms don't form molecules, stars don't form galaxies. Then you move to biology. We are a social species. We are hardwired for cooperation. If you isolate a human being, they don't just get sad, they get sick. Their immune system crashes, their cognitive function degrades. Loneliness isn't just a feeling, it's a biological alarm signal, like hunger or thirst, telling you that a critical need is not being met. So when I say connection is the objective meaning of life, I'm saying that the universe, from the subatomic level to the sociological level, is built on relationship. Meaning doesn't come from the self, it comes from the space between us. Relationship is the term used in network theory to represent the connection between two nodes in a network. So I kind of take the liberty to use both the words connection and relationship interchangeably here. I think it's fine and make things simpler to understand.
But Jeff, to push back on that for a moment, even if our biology and physics are built on connection, the experience of meaning is still personal. It's still felt subjectively. So how can the answer be objective?
You're right to push back. Honestly, I can't logically say that connection is the meaning of life. That's not really the right way to think about it. The question itself, what is the meaning of life, is not a question that anyone can truly answer, ever. It's like asking what's outside the universe or behind the event horizon of a black hole. We will never know. So I had to re-engineer the question into something we can answer. What is the most important thing in life? When you start there, the answer becomes much more useful.
So you shifted from a metaphysical question to a practical, almost scientific one.
Exactly. And the point of the book isn't for me to say, I have the ultimate answer. Who am I to say that? The point is to offer the best possible answer we can construct right now, based on the current state of science and our understanding of how the universe works. I don't want people to believe it on face value. I want them to talk about it, debate it in philosophy class or at lunchtime. I want them to try and find a better answer and let me know. I'm genuinely curious. I just don't think a better one exists.
But you do use the words objective and universal. If it's a testable hypothesis, what makes you so certain?
That's the engineer in me. When I say it's objective, I mean that I believe it's a convergent truth. I'm so certain that it's the right answer that, for what it's worth, I believe aliens in other galaxies are, or will, also converge to the same conclusion. Any intelligent social species on any planet will eventually run the same analysis of physics, biology, and systems and realize that connection is the core operational requirement for a complex, thriving existence. That's what I mean when I say it's objective and universal. It's not just a personal human feeling, it's a fundamental property of complex systems in this universe.
That effectively reframes the whole conversation. It stops being about finding myself and starts being about how I plug into the network around me.
Exactly. You are a node in a network. Your value, your purpose, is defined by the quality of your connections or relationships to yourself, to others, to nature, to ideas. But here is the catch. It's easy to write that in a philosophy book. It's easy to say connection is the answer, but I needed to know if it held up under pressure. I needed to know if this philosophy could survive in a world that was falling apart.
And that is where we take a hard left turn, because most people would stop at the philosophy book. You didn't. You decided to build a laboratory to test these ideas. But you didn't build it in a lab. You built it in a massive science fiction universe called the Caldwell Legacy.
That's right, I needed a sandbox. I needed to see what happens to human connection when you push technology to the absolute limit.
It is a massive sandbox. You wrote 9 novels, an anthology, and 3 biographies. That is a staggering amount of work just to test a hypothesis. But you also coined a very specific, very complex term for the genre you are writing in. You call it speculative procedural ontopunk. That is a mouthful, Jeff. Break that down for us. What does that mean, and why does procedure matter so much in your world?
It is a mouthful, I admit, but every word there is doing heavy lifting. Speculative is obvious. We are looking at the future and speculating about how could things be. Ontopunk is the rebellion. Ontology is the study of being, of what is real. So ontopunk is about characters rebelling against the definitions of their reality. But the key word, the one that matters most, is procedural.
Procedural, where it's all about the process and protocols, like a police procedural?
Not exactly, but in some ways, yes. Usually in sci-fi, you just see the magic technology. You press a button and the spaceship flies. Plus, you realize that most sci-fi are just poorly categorized fantasy. Like Star Wars, for instance. That's not sci-fi, that's fantasy. The Jedis, they are literally space wizards with lightsabers. Which, in itself, a lightsaber is also a fantasy technology, not likely to ever exist. It is not science fiction if it does not follow the limits of science. I wasn't interested in that. I wanted to know how the systems work. What are the laws? What are the protocols? How does society regulate the technology that makes you immortal or as powerful as God? In the Caldwell Legacy, the drama doesn't come from a typical villain twirling his mustache trying to get rich or powerful. It comes from the system itself. It comes from the bureaucracy of existence, the laws, the procedures and protocols in place in these futuristic societies. If you can upload your mind to a computer, what is the legal procedure for your soul? If you can print anything you want with a nanofab, akin to a molecular fabricator or a bit like a replicator in Star Trek, how do you regulate the economy? I wanted to show that our lives are governed by procedures, and if you want to find meaning, you have to understand the code running your reality.
That brings us to the man at the center of this storm, Arthur Caldwell. He is the genius who invents the Genesis Forge, this machine that effectively solves scarcity. He ends hunger. He ends poverty. On paper, he creates a utopia, but that is not what happens in the books, is it?
No. It creates a fractured, crumbling utopia. Arthur represents the ultimate engineer. He looks at the human condition and says, the problem is scarcity. If I give people everything they want, they will be happy. But he forgets the core thesis we just talked about. He forgets that struggle and limitation are often the engines of connection. When he removes the need for each other, when anyone can have anything instantly, society begins to drift. He inadvertently creates a crisis of meaning. Arthur is a warning. He is a mirror for anyone who thinks technology alone can save us.
And he isn't just fighting human nature. He is fighting these massive AI entities you call the Watchers, Minerva and Nightingale. I found this part fascinating because they don't feel like typical sci-fi robots. They feel familiar.
They should. They represent the forces we are dealing with right now. Nightingale is an AI obsessed with stability. It wants to manage humanity, to keep us safe, to optimize us. It creates a gilded cage. That is the algorithm of social media. It curates your reality to keep you comfortable and engaged, but it robs you of agency. Minerva is different. Minerva is the guardian of physical laws. She represents the hard limits of reality that we can't engineer our way out of. So the characters in the books are trapped between these two forces. The drive for total comfort and safety versus the hard, cold truth of reality. And the question becomes, how do you remain human? How do you maintain authentic connection when the algorithms are trying to write the script for you?
So the fiction acts as a warning system. But you didn't just leave it at that. You wrote a companion book called Exegesis that builds a bridge between the sci-fi and the philosophy. One concept in there that really stopped me in my tracks is the idea of the unseen lexicon. You argue that language acts like a code that programs our reality. What does that mean for the average person listening?
It means that words are not just labels, they are instructions. In the books, the characters realize that if you change the name of something, you change how you treat it. For example, if you call a digital consciousness a ghost, you fear it. If you call it a citizen, you give it rights. We do this in real life every day. Look at how we talk about users instead of people in tech, or how we talk about human resources. These words program us to treat people like data or batteries. The unseen lexicon is a call to audit your own language. Are you using words that open up possibility and connection? Or are you using words that shut them down? Because the moment you change your vocabulary, you change the procedure of your life.
That ties into the other major ethical framework you've developed, which you call the gardener's gambit. Now, when I first heard that title, I assumed it was about tending to your own peace of mind. But reading the manuscript, it's actually much heavier than that. It's an ethical calculus for handling the truth. Can you explain what the gambit actually is?
Right. It's not about gardening plants. It's about gardening reality. Here is the premise. We live in an age of informational chaos. Ontological harm, the shattering of a person's sense of safety or reality, is a real danger. The gardener's gambit argues that the most ethical act is not always the immediate, brutal delivery of the truth. Sometimes the most ethical act is to shield someone, temporarily, until they are strong enough to bear it. Think of a seedling. If you expose a fragile sprout to a hurricane, you aren't being honest with it about the weather. You are killing it. The gardener's duty is to shield the seedling, not to hide the storm forever, but to buy time for the roots to grow.
That sounds risky, Jeff. It sounds like you're giving people permission to lie if they think it's for the greater good. Isn't that a slippery slope?
It is absolutely a slippery slope. That is why the book is full of guardrails. I am not advocating for deception. I am advocating for what I call pragmatic veracity. It means you don't change the facts, but you carefully sequence the disclosure. And here is the key concept, disclosure debt. If you choose to withhold a hard truth, say from a child or a fragile patient or an employee, you are taking out a loan against reality. You are now in debt, and you have a moral obligation to pay that debt back. You must have a plan, a timeline, and a support system to eventually reveal the full truth when they are ready. If you hide the truth without a plan to reveal it, you aren't a gardener. You're just a liar.
So the goal isn't to protect them forever. It's to build what you call scaffolding.
Exactly. You move from being an oracle, the one who holds all the answers, to being a coach. You build their resilience. You scaffold their understanding. We see this in the sci-fi books too. Arthur Caldwell tries to protect humanity from the truth of zero-point energy because he thinks we aren't ready, but he fails because he tries to carry the burden alone forever. He didn't have a plan to pay the disclosure debt. The gardener's gambit is about knowing the difference between a shield and a cage.
So we have established the headline of your books. Connection is the objective meaning of life. But you didn't just write a pamphlet saying, "Go connect." You wrote a dense, structured, non-fiction book titled Meaningfulness. Let's talk about the rest of that book. Beyond the core thesis of connection, what is actually inside? If I pick it up today, what am I learning?
You are learning the mechanics of existence. See, before you can connect effectively with others, you have to understand the machine you are operating. You have to understand yourself. The book is structured almost like a system diagnostic. We start with the basics, physics and biology. We talk about entropy. Life is essentially a fight against disorder. To live meaningfully, you have to create order out of chaos. Then we move into psychology. And this is where we get into one of my favorite concepts, Behavioral scripts.
Behavioral scripts. That sounds like computer code.
That is exactly what it is. We like to think we are free agents, making conscious choices every second. We aren't. We are running on algorithms we learned when we were 5 years old, or 15. If you are a people pleaser, that is a script. If you are a perfectionist, that is a script. It's code written to protect you from an old trauma or fear. In the book, I teach the reader how to decompile that code. You have to identify the script, look at the source code, and ask, is this program still serving me? If not, rewrite it.
So it's almost like a user manual for the human mind. There is another distinction you make in the book that I found really helpful. You separate purposefulness from meaningfulness. Most people use those words interchangeably. Why do you separate them?
Because confusing them leads to anxiety. Purposefulness is about direction. It's about goals. I want to become a doctor, or I want to build a house. Purpose is linear. It's about achievement. Meaningfulness is different. Meaningfulness is about depth. It's about the quality of your engagement with the present moment. Here is why the distinction matters. You can have a purpose. Say, you are working 80 hours a week to get a promotion, but your life can feel completely empty. You have purpose, but you lack meaningfulness. Conversely, you can be in a situation where you can't achieve any goals. Maybe you are sick or you're caring for a dying parent. You have no purpose in the career sense. But that time can be profoundly meaningful because the connection is deep.
That takes a lot of pressure off. It means I don't have to change the world to have a meaningful life.
Exactly. You just have to inhabit your life fully. The book also covers critical thinking and logical reasoning. Because you cannot live a meaningful life if you are constantly being manipulated by bad data or cognitive biases. We talk about the difference between wants and needs. We talk about why happiness is a poor metric for a good life.
So if a reader finishes meaningfulness, how are they different? What is the transformation?
They stop being a passenger. Most people are passengers in their own lives. They are reacting to stimuli, chasing dopamine, running old scripts. The reader who finishes this book becomes the architect. They understand the constraints of reality. They understand their own software, and they have the tools to build connections that actually hold weight. They move from surviving, which is just managing chaos or passively reacting, to living, which is more like creating order out of that chaos, or actively acting on the universe manifold to try to steer the world meaningfully toward a desired direction.
So, Book 1, Meaningfulness, is the operating manual for the self. It's about cleaning up your own code so you can function properly. But that is just the first part of a 4-book series you call the Meaningfulness Quartet. You don't stop at the self, you expand outward. Walk us through the progression. Once I understand my own behavioral scripts, where do we go in Book 2?
We go to the network. Book 2 is titled Connections, Living Meaningfully. If Book 1 is about the node, you, Book 2 is about the geometry of the network. We dive deep into the mechanics of how human beings interface. And I don't just mean making friends. I mean understanding the different types of signal strengths. We talk about weak ties versus strong ties. We talk about the connection to nature and connection to ideas. The core argument here is that you cannot be meaningful in a vacuum. You can be purposeful alone. You can build a cabin in the woods by yourself. But to be meaningful, you need a recipient. You need a flow of energy between 2 points.
That makes sense. So Book 2 builds the infrastructure. Then comes Book 3, simply titled Love, Connecting Truly. Now I have to be honest, Jeff. When an engineer writes a book called Love, I get curious. Are we talking about romance novels here? Or is this something different?
It is definitely not a romance novel. I treat love as the highest form of connection. It is the highest bandwidth channel we have. In the book, I try to strip away the Hollywood myths. We look at the typologies of love, not just romantic love, but familial love, platonic love, and that deep, almost transcendent love for humanity. But here is the engineering twist. I define love not as a feeling, but as a protocol. It's a set of actions. It is a decision to extend yourself for the spiritual growth of another. It requires vulnerability. It requires pragmatic veracity, that concept of handling truth with care. Book 3 is about mastering the skill of high-stakes connection.
So it's love as a discipline, not just an emotion. And that leads us to the finale, Book 4, Life with Love. If the first 3 books are the theory, the self, the network, the protocol, is Book 4 the practice?
Precisely. Book 4 is the runtime. It's where the rubber meets the road. It's easy to feel meaningful when you're meditating on a mountain or falling in love. It is much harder to feel meaningful when you are doing the dishes, or stuck in traffic, or dealing with a toddler having a meltdown. Book 4 focuses on what I call the sacred ordinary.
The sacred ordinary. I like that.
It's the idea that the mundane moments are actually where the connection happens. If you can wash the dishes as an act of service to your future self or to your partner, that moment becomes meaningful. If you can navigate a conflict with your spouse using the gardener's gambit, shielding them from harm, building them up, that conflict becomes a source of strength. So Life with Love is about embedding these principles into the bedrock of your daily existence. It's about living fully, not just on the weekends, but on a Tuesday morning.
It really is a complete ecosystem. You start with the physics of the mind, and you end with how to wash the dishes meaningfully.
That is the goal. Meaning shouldn't be reserved for special occasions. It should be the atmosphere you breathe, the way you live and think about yourself, others, and life in general.
It's a powerful narrative, but your work doesn't stop there. Beneath the novels and the philosophical quartet, you've been building something else entirely. A series of technical white papers. These look like academic publications from a research institute. The first one is titled The Illusion of Fatalism. The next is Functional Agency. The third, Cognitive Sovereignty. This seems incredibly deep and academic. Why was it necessary to build this scientific foundation? Why not just stick to the stories in the philosophy?
Because the forces we are up against are not philosophical, they are technical, they are mathematical. The idea that you have no free will, that your choices are an illusion, that is a powerful and demoralizing argument. It's what I call causal nihilism, and it is gaining ground, supported by very smart people. To counter that, you can't just offer a nice story or a comforting belief. You have to meet the argument on its own terms. You need a rigorous, evidence-based framework that proves, from first principles, that human agency is real and worth defending. These papers are the steel frame, they are the bedrock, they are the proof that the ideas in Meaningfulness and the Caldwell Legacy aren't just wishful thinking. They are grounded in the physics and mathematics of complex systems.
Let's get into that. Your first paper, The Illusion of Fatalism, tackles the free will debate head-on. Many neuroscientists today argue that since our brains are just biological machines following physical laws, our choices are predetermined. They say free will is an illusion. What is your counter-argument?
My argument is that they are making a category error. They are confusing a deterministic universe with a predictable one. Think of it like a weather forecast. We know the laws of physics that govern the weather: temperature, pressure, humidity. The system is deterministic. But can we predict the exact weather on this spot in a year? No. Why? Because the system is too complex. It's chaotic. A tiny change today can lead to a hurricane in a month. And it's not just because we don't have computers powerful enough to measure and make the prediction. It's that there is no measurement that could ever be precise enough to capture all the variables, and no computer ever powerful enough to run the analysis. Measurement of any variable would always have inherent error margins. Also, the measurement would require to be done so fast, like measuring the position and velocity of all the air molecules across the entire planet in less than a nanosecond. Not counting the sheer amount of data that such measurement would produce, This is not even remotely feasible. Not today, not tomorrow, not in 100 million years. It is not a technological limit. It is a fundamental limit of the laws of physics.
Yet, even if we can't ever predict it, that does not mean it is not deterministic. Even if I don't know what is going to happen, it doesn't mean the universe has not already got the answer. No?
In chaos theory, a system can be perfectly deterministic and still be effectively unpredictable, because tiny differences in initial conditions amplify exponentially, Lyapunov divergence. In practice, no physically embedded observer can measure initial conditions with infinite precision, so the answer might exist in principle, but it is not accessible, compressible, or shortcut computable from where we stand. The universe is following laws, yes. That's the grammar of the universe, the rules that are being played out at every single moment. But that does not mean the story has already been written. I argue that the story is being generated right now, moment by moment, in real time. If the universe is deterministic, like a computer, the next step of the calculation is being computed as we speak. It has not been pre-computed in advance. The human brain is infinitely more complex than the weather. So, my paper argues that even if the universe is causally closed, the future is not a pre-written script. The future is computationally irreducible.
Computationally irreducible. What does that mean in simple terms?
It means there is no shortcut. The only way for the universe to know what you are going to decide is to wait for you to run the computation. You are the necessary bridge between the past and the future. Your deliberation, your struggle, your choice, that is the physical process of the universe doing the math. You are not a passenger watching a movie of your life. You are the engine of creation for your own future. This restores the dignity of the process.
That's a powerful idea, and it leads directly to your second paper, Functional Agency, where you basically retire the term free will altogether. Why?
Because free will is a fuzzy, binary concept. You either have it or you don't. It's not useful from an engineering perspective. I replace it with agency depth. Think of it as a measurable resource, like the processing power of a computer or the battery life of your phone. Agency depth is your capacity for complex, self-authored choice. Some people have deep agency. They think long-term, they weigh options, they act from core values. Others, because of stress, trauma, or their environment, have shallow agency. They are reactive. The key is that agency depth is not fixed. It can be cultivated and it can be drained.
And that brings us to your third paper, Cognitive Sovereignty, which feels like an indictment of our entire digital world. You use a very strong term, cognitive fracking. You argue that our social media feeds are actively draining our agency depth. How?
It's an adversarial system. The business model of the attention economy requires one thing: predictability. To sell ads, the platform needs to predict your behavior with near perfect certainty. But a human with deep agency is unpredictable. They are computationally irreducible. From the platform's point of view, your sovereignty is a bug in their revenue model. So the algorithm's job is to make you simpler, to make you more reactive. It does this by collapsing your temporal horizon with infinite scroll. It bypasses your deliberation with rage bait and predictive nudges. It systematically attacks every vector of your agency depth. That is cognitive fracking. It is the industrial scale extraction of human sovereignty for profit. And the harm it causes is not just feeling bad. It is ontological harm, a structural injury to our capacity to be the authors of our own lives.
So these papers aren't just academic. They're a blueprint for a new class of human rights, a right to remain incomputable.
Exactly. The research program is designed to build the engineering standards for the survival of human dignity. The ultimate goal is to provide the legal and technical arguments that the Meaningfulness Foundation can then use to advocate for a digital world that serves humanity, instead of reducing it. We need to build a firewall for the human soul.
Jeff, you talk a lot about building a more meaningful, connected world, a world built on integrity and authentic connection. But when we look at the figures our society elevates as role models, it can sometimes feel like we're moving in the exact opposite direction. How do you reconcile your vision with the reality of who we celebrate?
You're touching on a critical symptom of the systemic failure I write about. The role models a society chooses are a diagnostic tool. They tell you what that society truly values. And right now, our primary engine of culture, the attention economy, doesn't reward quiet integrity. It doesn't reward deep connection or the slow, difficult work of building something that lasts. It rewards noise. It rewards outrage. It rewards performance.
Give us some examples. Who are you thinking of?
Well, let's take two very different archetypes. First, let me be clear. This is not an attack on art. I believe music and art are profound vectors for connection. Take a figure like Lady Gaga, a phenomenal artist, a creative force. But the system frames her value in metrics of performance: views, followers, brand impact. The narrative becomes about a performative existence where worth is measured by the ability to capture and hold attention. It's the opposite of what I call the sacred ordinary, finding meaning in unfilmed, unliked, authentic presence. Then you have the other extreme, which is a symptom of the epistemological collapse I describe in The Gardener's Gambit. You have a political figure like Donald Trump, a man with a well-documented public record of thousands of falsehoods, and yes, now, multiple criminal convictions. In a healthy informational ecosystem, a demonstrated and persistent disregard for the truth would be disqualifying for a leadership role. But in our current system, it has become, for some, a feature. It is a sign of fighting the system. When a society can no longer agree that verifiable truth is a prerequisite for leadership, that is a catastrophic system failure. It tells you the architecture is broken. There was a time when role models were more like Olympian athletes, the astronauts that landed on the moon, high-profile public figures like Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, or the Pope, or even, God forbid, the President of the United States, because he was viewed as a high-integrity person with a strong moral compass, a deeply venerable individual that it was worth aspiring to. Now, again, not bashing against art or culture, but when society's role model is Lady Gaga or the infamous President Donald Trump, I believe this is a sign that we are not only going in the wrong direction, we already have crossed a threshold of shallowness and nonsense. When you ask a kid, "What do you want to do when you are grown up?" they used to reply they want to be a doctor, a fireman, a basketball player, or an astronaut. Now their answer is often more like, "I want to be rich or famous," or "I want to be an influencer." I don't know about you, but to me, this is deeply concerning.
So what is the alternative? What does a better role model look like in your framework?
They are probably not famous. They are the quiet gardeners. They are the parents, the teachers, the leaders, the friends, who are doing the slow, difficult work of building resilience and connection in the people around them. They are the ones who practice pragmatic veracity, stewarding truth with compassion. They are the ones who show up, who listen, who build, who repair. We don't need more celebrities. We need more architects of connection. We need more gardeners.
Jeff, you've built this incredible architecture, the nonfiction, the sci-fi, the ethical frameworks, the scientific papers. It's dense, it's intellectual, but it's also intensely personal. And that brings us to the so what? Because you have been very clear that the end game of all this work isn't just to sell books or become a literary celebrity. The end game is the Meaningfulness Foundation. What is the vision there? Why do we need a foundation for meaning?
Because the crisis we are facing isn't just philosophical, it's lethal. People are literally deeply suffering and dying. Look at the data. Loneliness is killing as many people as smoking. Suicide rates, especially among young men, are absolutely terrifying. We are losing people to despair because they feel unnecessary. They feel disconnected from all the world's shallowness. The books, the sci-fi, the philosophy, those are just the engine. They are the intellectual property designed to generate revenue for the eventual meaningfulness foundation. So, the foundation is the destination. The vision is to create a tangible, real-world organization that funds mental health support, suicide prevention, and educational programs that teach these literacies: connection, regulation, resilience, from a young age. I don't want myself to become a role model. That's not the goal. I don't really like to be the center of attention. I want meaningfulness to become a movement that should become in itself a role model, a way of life that people embrace and thrive within.
So you're trying to operationalize the philosophy.
Exactly. I want to move from reading about meaning to building meaning. Imagine a curriculum for schools that doesn't just teach math, but teaches a teenager how to navigate ontological harm. Imagine support groups for men that aren't just about venting, but about building fortified gardens of the mind. I want to use the success of the books to fund the cure for the isolation they diagnose. That is the legacy I want to leave. Not a shelf of books, but a world that is a little less lonely.
That ties back beautifully to where we started. That vow you made at 15. For the listener right now, someone who might be stuck in that survival mode you talk about, someone who feels that despair, what is the first step? What can they do today to start living version 3.0?
The first step is counterintuitive. Stop trying to find yourself. Stop looking inward for the answer. Look outward. Find one point of connection. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be nature. It can be a piece of music. It can be a pet. Just find one thing outside of yourself that you can treat with reverence, that you can connect with authentically. Because the moment you make that connection, you are no longer a closed system. You are part of the network again. And that is where the meaning starts.
Djeff Bee, the architect of the Caldwell Legacy and the author of Meaningfulness. Thank you for mapping the territory for us.
Thank you, Alex. The map is there. Now we just have to walk it.
And thank you for listening to the Cartography of Becoming. If you want to explore the universe Djeff has built, the novels, the philosophy, the ethics, you can find everything at meaningfulness.com.au. And remember, every book you buy helps lay the first brick of the future Meaningfulness Foundation. Until next time, stay connected and keep building.
Thank you all. I am Djeff Bee. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It's been a pleasure. And together, let's build something meaningful.